The morning sun cast long shadows across New Eden Colony as Katie Clark ran through the garden paths between the growing domes. Her blonde hair bounced behind her as she chased Marcus Johnson around the corner where the tomato plants grew tall and green. Sophia Martinez sat on a wooden bench nearby, braiding flower stems into a chain while watching her friends play. The three children had known each other since they were babies, growing up together on this peaceful world at the edge of human space. John Clark wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked the moisture levels in the corn dome. His wife Lisa worked, in the next dome over, tending to the bean plants that would feed the colony through the winter months. They had come to New Eden 5 years ago, when Katie was just 3 years old, hoping to build a better life away from the crowded cities of Earth. The colony had grown to nearly 2,000 people, all families seeking the same dream of peace and prosperity among the stars. Paul Mitchell walked his security rounds through the settlement, his military training from his days in the Earth Defense Force, still sharp despite years of peaceful colony life. He nodded to the parents working in their gardens and waved to the children playing in the central square. Today was the Harvest Festival, and everyone was preparing for the evening celebration. Tables were being set up in the main square, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the community kitchens. The Vorthak fleet hung silent in the darkness beyond New Eden's outer moon. Captain Zexhai studied the human colony through his ship's sensors, counting the thermal signatures of the small beings that moved through the settlement. 47 juveniles registered on his scanners, all within the optimal age range for conditioning. The Vorthak Syndicate had been watching human colonies for months, studying their habits and weaknesses. These humans were far from their homeworld, with no military protection and limited communication systems. Zexhai's first officer, Commander Nexdal, reviewed the mission parameters on his command console. The human juveniles showed remarkable neuroplasticity in their brain scans, far superior to other species they had harvested over the centuries. Young human minds could be molded and programmed with ease, creating perfect servants and soldiers for the Syndicate's clients across the galaxy. The profit from this single operation would fund their fleet for years. Katie called out to her mother as she ran past the bean dome, her voice bright with excitement about the festival. Lisa smiled and waved back, proud of how well her daughter had adapted to colony life. The other children in the settlement were equally happy and healthy, their laughter echoing through the growing domes as they played games and helped their parents with the harvest preparations. The festival began as the sun reached its peak in the clear blue sky. Families gathered in the central square, sharing food and stories while the children ran between the tables playing tag and hide-and-seek. Marcus Johnson's father, Steve, played guitar while other colonists sang songs from Earth. Sophia Martinez helped her mother, Carmen, serve fresh fruit to the crowd while her father, Diego, told jokes that made everyone laugh. Paul Mitchell relaxed his guard slightly as he watched the celebration from the edge of the square. Nothing had ever threatened New Eden Colony in all his years of service here. The nearest hostile species was hundreds of light years away, and their location was known only to the colonial registry back on Earth. He allowed himself to enjoy the music and the sight of happy families celebrating another successful harvest. The Vorthak strike began without warning as the afternoon sun started its descent toward the horizon. Invisible ships descended through the atmosphere, their cloaking technology rendering them completely undetectable to human sensors. Neural disruptor fields activated across the settlement, sending waves of confusion and disorientation through the adult population. Parents stumbled and fell to their knees, their minds clouded by alien technology designed to incapacitate without killing. Katie felt dizzy suddenly and reached for her mother's hand, but Lisa was already collapsing beside. The bean dome, all around the settlement, adults began falling unconscious as the neural field intensified. The children remained standing, their young brains more resistant to the alien weapon, but they cried out in fear as they watched their parents fall. Vorthak. Soldiers materialized as their personal cloaking devices deactivated. Tall and thin with pale gray skin and large black eyes, they moved through the settlement with practiced efficiency. Stunner weapons fired into the crowd of children, dropping them one by one as they tried to run or hide. Marcus Johnson fell beside the guitar his father had been playing moments before. Sophia Martinez collapsed while reaching for her unconscious mother. Paul Mitchell fought against the neural disruptor with all his military training, forcing himself to stay conscious longer than the other adults. He managed to crawl toward the communication center, his vision blurred and his hands shaking as he activated the emergency beacon. The message was brief and desperate before the alien soldiers found him and fired their stunner weapons. Zexhai supervised the loading of the human juveniles into the transport pods with cold satisfaction. Each child was secured in a containment field that would keep them unconscious during the journey to the conditioning facility. Katie Clark was among the first loaded, her small form limp in the alien device. Marcus Johnson and Sophia Martinez followed, along with 44 other children from families who had thought they were safe on their distant world. The Vorthak fleet departed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a settlement full of unconscious adults and empty homes. The emergency beacon continued to transmit its desperate message into space, hoping that someone would hear and understand what had happened to New Eden Colony. The Harvest Festival tables still stood in the central square, but now they were surrounded by silence instead of laughter. Hours passed before the neural disruptor effects began to fade and the adults started to wake up. John Clark called out for Katie as soon as he could stand, his voice echoing through the empty settlement. Lisa stumbled from parent to parent, asking if anyone had seen their daughter. Steve Johnson searched every building for Marcus, while Carmen and Diego Martinez called Sophia's name until their voices went hoarse. Paul Mitchell reached the communication center and confirmed that the emergency beacon was transmitting. He had military experience with alien raids, but nothing had prepared him for this. The attackers had taken only the children, leaving the adults alive to suffer the loss. It was a cruelty beyond anything he had encountered in his years of service. Tapper. Beacon's message traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying news of the tragedy to distant human outposts. 27 hours after the attack, it reached the relay station at Terra Command, where Admiral Helen Brooks received the report that would change everything. 47 human children had been taken from New Eden Colony by unknown alien raiders, and the few words of the emergency transmission would soon trigger humanity's response. Admiral Helen Brooks stood in the command center at Terra Command, staring at the emergency message that had arrived from New Eden Colony. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her hands shake with rage. Children taken by alien raiders. 47 human children stolen from their homes while their parents lay helpless. She had seen many horrors during her 30 years of military service, but nothing had ever hit her like this message. The emergency beacon data played again on the main screen, showing Paul Mitchell's desperate transmission before the signal cut out. Brooks knew that every second counted when children were involved. She immediately activated Protocol 7, a classification reserved for the most serious crimes against humanity. Within minutes, every available ship in the sector received orders to converge on Terra Command for emergency deployment. Captain Alex Turner received his orders while his battleship Vengeance was docked at Mars Station for routine maintenance. His crew of 200 officers and enlisted personnel had been looking forward to shore leave, but the Protocol 7 alert changed everything. Turner had served under Admiral Brooks for 15 years and had never seen her this angry. The captain's briefing was short and direct. Find the children and destroy whoever took them. The Vengeance launched within 4 hours, its crew working around the clock to prepare for combat operations. Chief Engineer Danny Roberts pushed the ship's engines beyond normal safety limits to reach New Eden Colony as quickly as possible. Tactical Officer Lisa Wayne ran weapons diagnostics while Medical Officer Dr. Peter King prepared the ship's medical bay for possible casualties. Every person aboard understood that this mission was different from their usual patrol duties. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos worked in the intelligence section, analyzing every piece of data they had about alien species capable of interstellar raids. Her databases contained information on dozens of hostile civilizations, but only a few had the technology and motivation to attack human colonies. She cross-referenced the attack patterns with known criminal organizations operating in the outer sectors of the galaxy. The Vengeance arrived at New Eden Colony 36 hours after the attack. Captain Turner led a landing party to the surface while his ship maintained orbit and scanned for any trace of the alien raiders. The colony looked peaceful from space, but the landing party found a settlement filled with grief and desperation. Parents wandered through empty homes, calling the names of children who would never answer. Paul Mitchell met the landing party at the settlement's edge, his face showing the strain of the past day. He had organized the surviving colonists and gathered what evidence they could find of the alien attack. Strange energy signatures lingered in the air near where the children had been taken. Burn marks in the ground showed where alien ships had landed, and residual radiation indicated advanced cloaking technology. Dr. King examined the colonists who had been affected by the neural disruptor weapons. John and Lisa Clark sat together in their empty home, staring at Katie's toys scattered across the floor. Steve Johnson refused to leave the spot where his son Marcus had been playing guitar with him during the festival. Carmen and Diego Martinez held each other and wept for their daughter Sophia, their world destroyed in a matter of hours. Captain Turner walked through the settlement with Paul Mitchell, studying the attack pattern and trying to understand the aliens' methods. The raiders had been precise and efficient, taking only the children while leaving the adults alive but helpless. This suggested a criminal organization rather than a military force, one that specialized in kidnapping operations for profit. Maria Santos found her first breakthrough when she analyzed the energy signatures left by the alien ships. The quantum resonance patterns matched records from 6 other human colonies that had suffered similar attacks over the past year. Each raid had followed the same pattern: neural disruptors to incapacitate adults, precision strikes to capture children, and complete withdrawal within hours. Over 200 human children had been taken in total. The intelligence data revealed the identity of their enemy, the Vorthak Syndicate, a criminal organization that had operated in the outer galaxy for centuries. They specialized in slave trading, selling captured beings to clients across dozens of star systems. The syndicate was led by Supreme Commander Veltar from their homeworld of Veltash Prime, protected by a fleet of advanced warships and cloaking technology. Admiral Brooks received Santos's report while coordinating the search effort from Terra Command. The Vorthak Syndicate had made a critical mistake by targeting human children. No other species in the galaxy responded to threats against their young the way humans did. Brooks began issuing orders that would mobilize the largest military force. In human history, Captain Turner's crew worked to track the Vorthak fleet through hyperspace, following the faint energy trail left by their ships. Chief Engineer Roberts modified the Vengeance's sensors to detect the specific quantum signatures of Vorthak technology. The trail led away from human space toward the unexplored regions where criminal organizations often established their bases. 3. More battleships joined the hunt within hours. The Defiance under Commander Beth Taylor, the Retribution under Commander Ryan Clark, and the Justice under Commander Frank Moore. Each ship carried a full crew of experienced officers who had volunteered for the mission. Word was spreading through the human fleet about the kidnapped children, and volunteers were arriving from every corner of human space. Dr. King studied the medical data from the attack, trying to understand why the neural disruptors had affected adults, but not children. His analysis suggested that the aliens had specifically designed their weapons to target mature human brain patterns while leaving younger minds relatively unharmed. This was not a random attack, but a carefully planned operation to harvest human children for unknown purposes. The search fleet followed the Vorthak trail for 3 days, jumping from system to system as they tracked their prey deeper into unexplored space. Each jump brought them further from human territory and closer to the criminal underworld where the Syndicate operated. Captain Turner knew they were entering dangerous territory, but nothing would stop him from finding the children. Maria Santos discovered disturbing intelligence about Vorthak operations during her research. The Syndicate did not simply sell their captives as laborers or servants. They operated conditioning facilities where victims were subjected to neural programming designed to erase their original personalities and memories. Children were particularly valuable because their minds could be completely reprogrammed to serve their new masters without question. Admiral Brooks read Santos's report and felt her anger turn to cold fury. The aliens were not just kidnapping human children. They were destroying everything that made them human. She authorized the deployment of additional ships and weapon systems that had been held in reserve since the last interstellar war. The rescue mission was becoming something much larger and more dangerous. The Vengeance and its escort ships finally detected active Vorthak signals in a system on the edge of known space. Long-range sensors showed a small outpost built into an asteroid, clearly designed as a way station for criminal operations. Captain Turner ordered his fleet to battle stations as they prepared to make their first strike against the Syndicate that had dared to steal human children. Captain Turner studied the asteroid outpost through the Vengeance's long-range sensors, while his fleet held position at the edge of the system. The Vorthak facility was built deep inside the rocky surface, with only a few sensor arrays and docking ports visible from space. Energy readings suggested the base housed several hundred beings, both Vorthak personnel and what appeared to be captives from various species. The tactical situation was complex because any direct assault might harm the prisoners inside the facility. Lisa Wayne worked with her weapons team to develop a plan that would disable the outpost's defenses without destroying the entire asteroid. Chief Engineer Roberts modified the ship's systems to jam Vorthak communications and prevent them from calling for reinforcements or harming their captives. Commander Beth Taylor's ship Defiance moved into position on the far side of the asteroid, while Commander Ryan Clark's Retribution approached from below. The 3 human battleships formed a triangle around the Vorthak outpost, ready to strike from multiple angles. Each ship carried Marines trained in close-quarters combat and hostage rescue operations. The attack began with coordinated strikes against the outpost's external systems. The Vengeance fired precision shots that disabled the sensor arrays, while the other ships targeted the defensive weapons platforms. Within minutes, the Vorthak facility was blind and defenseless, cut off from the outside galaxy by the human fleet's electronic warfare systems. Captain Turner led the first wave of Marines through the asteroid's main docking port. The corridors inside were narrow and poorly lit, designed for the tall, thin frames of Vorthak personnel rather than human soldiers. The Marines moved carefully through the facility, following their scanners toward the areas where life signs indicated the presence of captives. The first group of prisoners they found were not human children, but adults from a dozen different alien species. These beings had been held in the facility for months or even years, serving as test subjects for Vorthak conditioning experiments. Many showed signs of neural damage from repeated programming attempts, their minds broken by alien technology, designed to erase their original personalities. Dr. King accompanied the rescue teams and began examining the freed prisoners immediately. The medical equipment in his portable kit could detect the neural implants that the Vorthak had surgically inserted into their captives' brains. These devices were designed to control behavior and suppress memories, turning thinking beings into obedient servants who could be sold to clients across the galaxy. The Marines found the human children in a secured section deeper inside the asteroid. 23 young people from various human colonies were held in individual cells, each one monitored by Vorthak technicians who were attempting to map their brain patterns. The children ranged in age from 6 to 14 years old, all showing signs of the early stages of neural conditioning. Captain Turner personally opened the cell containing a 12-year-old girl named Amy Watson, who had been taken from her family on Frontier Station 3 months earlier. The child looked at him with empty eyes, her natural curiosity and personality suppressed by alien drugs and psychological manipulation. She did not recognize her own name when Turner spoke to her, responding only to the Vorthak designation they had given her. The sight of what had been done to the human children filled every Marine in the rescue team with a cold fury that went beyond normal military anger. These were not prisoners of war or adult criminals who had chosen their fate. They were innocent children who had been stolen from their families and subjected to torture designed to destroy everything that made them human. Dr. King worked frantically to stabilize the rescued children for transport back to the fleet. The neural conditioning process could be reversed if treatment began quickly enough, but every day of delay made recovery more difficult. He administered drugs to counteract the Vorthak chemicals while his medical team prepared the ship's facilities to handle the complex psychological trauma. Maria Santos interrogated the captured Vorthak personnel using translation software to understand their language and extract information about the syndicate's operations. What she learned was far worse than anyone had imagined. The facility they had just raided was only a small outpost in a network of hundreds of similar bases scattered across the galaxy. The Vorthak Syndicate had been operating for over 1,000 years, kidnapping members of primitive species and conditioning them for sale to more advanced civilizations. They had refined their techniques over centuries of practice, learning how to break the minds of their captives and rebuild them as perfect servants. Human children were particularly valuable because their brains were more adaptable than most species. Supreme Commander Veltar commanded the Syndicate from his flagship, a massive vessel that served as both military headquarters and mobile conditioning facility. The ship traveled constantly through Vorthak space, visiting client worlds and overseeing the network of outposts that supplied the slave trade. Intelligence suggested that over 50,000 beings were currently held in Syndicate facilities. Captain Turner sent his report to Admiral Brooks at Terra Command, including medical scans of the rescued children and interrogation data from the captured Vorthak. The information painted a picture of systematic cruelty that had been operating in the galaxy for centuries without any species mounting an effective response. Most civilizations simply accepted the loss of their people as the price of living in a dangerous universe. The human response was different. News of the children's condition spread through the human fleet like wildfire, reaching every ship and station in human space within hours. Parents who had never heard of the Vorthak Syndicate suddenly understood that their own children could be next. Colony governors demanded protection, while military commanders volunteered their ships for combat operations. Admiral Brooks received reports of spontaneous mobilization across human territory. Civilian ships were being converted to military use, while industrial facilities began producing weapons and supplies for an extended campaign. The rescue of 23 children from a single outpost had revealed an enemy that threatened every human family in the galaxy. President Laura Adams addressed the human population from her office on Earth, explaining the threat posed by the Vorthak Syndicate and authorizing the use of classified weapons systems that had been developed during the last interstellar war. The military reservations that had been maintained in secret for decades were suddenly opened, revealing ships and weapons that could match anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. King's preliminary examination of the rescued children provided crucial intelligence about Vorthak conditioning methods. The aliens used a combination of surgical implants, chemical treatments, and psychological manipulation to break down their victims' personalities. The process was designed to be irreversible, creating servants who would never rebel against their new masters or remember their original lives. The medical data also revealed why the Vorthak had specifically targeted human children. Human brain development continued much longer than most species, giving young humans greater neuroplasticity. that made them ideal subjects for conditioning. A human child could be completely reprogrammed while retaining all their intelligence and creativity, making them extremely valuable in the slave markets. Captain Turner prepared his expanded fleet for the next phase of operations. Intelligence from the captured outpost had revealed the location of a major Vorthak conditioning facility where hundreds of captives were being processed. The facility was heavily defended and located deep in Syndicate territory, but Turner knew his crews would follow him anywhere to rescue more children. The 23 rescued children were transported back to human space aboard medical ships, equipped with the latest neural therapy equipment. Their recovery would take months or years, but Dr. King was confident that most of them could be restored to normal lives. The real challenge would be finding and rescuing the thousands of other victims held in Vorthak facilities across the galaxy. Admiral Brooks stood before the assembled fleet commanders in the war room at Terra Command, looking at the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. 3,000 ships filled the space around Earth, from massive battleships to converted civilian vessels armed with military weapons. Every human colony had sent ships and volunteers, united by a fury that burned brighter than any star in the galaxy. The rescue operation had become something far beyond what anyone had originally planned. Captain Turner's discovery of the Vorthak conditioning facilities had revealed an enemy that threatened not just the kidnapped children, but every human family in the galaxy. President Adams had authorized the activation of weapons systems that had been classified since the last interstellar war, turning peaceful exploration ships into instruments of destruction. Commander Maria Santos presented the intelligence gathered from captured Vorthak personnel and their computer systems. The Syndicate controlled over 400 worlds scattered across a region of space larger than human territory. Their network of conditioning facilities processed thousands of victims, each year breaking their minds and selling them to clients throughout the galaxy. The operation was so vast that it had become the foundation of their entire civilization. Captain Turner's task force had been expanded to include 50 battleships under his direct command. Commander Beth Taylor led the assault fleets, while Commander Ryan Clark coordinated the intelligence operations that identified Vorthak targets. Each ship carried Marines trained specifically for raiding slave facilities and rescuing captives from alien conditioning programs. The first major battle occurred at the Vorthak stronghold of Kethmar, a heavily defended system that housed one of their largest conditioning facilities. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships advancing in waves toward the alien defensive positions. The Vorthak commanders had never faced an enemy that fought with such coordinated fury and determination. Lisa Wayne directed the tactical operations from the Bridge of the Vengeance as hundreds of human ships engaged the Vorthak defense fleet. The aliens had superior individual ships, but they had never encountered an enemy willing to sacrifice everything to protect their young. Human captains rammed their vessels into Vorthak cruisers, while Marines fought hand-to-hand in boarding actions that left entire ships drifting in space. The conditioning facility on Kethmar contained over 2,000 captives from dozens of species, including 300 human children taken from colonies across the frontier. Dr. King led the medical teams that treated the rescued victims, working around the clock to reverse the neural conditioning and repair the psychological damage inflicted by their captors. Supreme Commander Veltar watched the destruction of Kethmar from his flagship deep in Vorthak space, finally beginning to understand the nature of the enemy he had awakened. No species in his 1,000 years of experience had ever responded to the Syndicate's operations with such overwhelming violence. Other civilizations negotiated or paid ransoms for their captured people, but humans seemed determined to destroy everything connected to the slave trade. The human fleet moved through Vorthak space like a force of nature, systematically destroying every facility and outpost they encountered. They showed no mercy to aliens who profited from child slavery, reducing entire worlds to smoking ruins when their populations refused to surrender. The galaxy watched in shock as humanity demonstrated what happened when someone threatened their young. Katie Clark huddled with the other children in the holding cells aboard the Vorthak flagship, listening to the distant sounds of explosions and weapons fire. The alien conditioning process had failed to break her spirit, and she had organized the human children into a resistance group that sabotaged their captors whenever possible. Marcus Johnson and Sophia Martinez helped her plan acts of defiance that disrupted the ship's operations and provided intelligence to any rescuers who might find them. The children had learned to communicate through a code based on Earth nursery rhymes that the Vorthak could not understand. Katie used this system to coordinate their resistance activities and maintain the human identity that their captors were trying to erase. Every day they reminded each other of their real names, their parents, and their homes on distant colonies. Commander Santos worked with her intelligence teams to track the movement of Supreme Commander Veltar's flagship through intercepted communications and sensor data. The massive vessel was protected by the most advanced cloaking technology in the Vorthak fleet, but it could not hide completely while conducting its conditioning operations. Each transmission and energy signature brought the human pursuit closer to their target. The war expanded beyond simple rescue operations as humanity realized the full scope of the Vorthak threat. Every world that had participated in or profited from the slave trade became a target for complete destruction. Human forces showed no interest in conquest or negotiation, focusing instead on the systematic elimination of everything connected to the syndicate. Other alien civilizations attempted to intervene diplomatically, offering to mediate between humans and the Vorthak syndicate. Admiral Brooks rejected every proposal with the same response. There would be no negotiation with those who tortured children. The galaxy began to understand that humanity operated by different rules than any species they had encountered before. Captain Turner's fleet discovered a Vorthak client world where conditioned slaves were sold at auction to buyers from across the galaxy. The human response was swift and absolute. Every being connected to the slave market was eliminated, while the victims were rescued and given medical treatment. The message to other potential clients was clear. Trading in human children would result in total destruction. Dr. King documented the full extent of Vorthak conditioning methods as his teams treated thousands of rescued victims. The aliens had perfected techniques for erasing memories, suppressing personalities, and rebuilding minds according to their clients' specifications. Children were particularly valuable because their developing brains could be completely reprogrammed while retaining their intelligence and creativity. The medical evidence provided legal justification for humanity's campaign of extinction against the Vorthak Syndicate. President Adams presented the documentation to the Galactic Council, showing that the syndicate had committed crimes against sentient life on a scale that demanded complete eradication. No punishment short of extinction could adequately address centuries of systematic torture and enslavement. Supreme Commander Veltar finally attempted to negotiate when human forces destroyed his home system and killed his family. He offered to return all human captives in exchange for an end to the war. But Admiral Brooks refused to consider any agreement that left the syndicate intact. The Vorthak leader began to understand that he had not simply angered another species, but had triggered an extinction event for his entire civilization. The human fleet continued its advance through Vorthak space, leaving nothing but empty systems and drifting wreckage in their wake. Every world that had supported the slave trade was systematically destroyed, while the few planets that surrendered and released their captives were allowed to survive under human occupation. The choice was simple: abandon the slave trade completely, or face total annihilation. Katie Clark managed to transmit the location of the Vorthak flagship to human forces using a communications device she had stolen during one of her sabotage missions. The signal was brief, but it provided enough information for Captain Turner's fleet to track down their primary target. The final battle for the rescued children was about to begin, and humanity would show no mercy to those who had dared to steal their young. Captain Turner received Katie Clark's transmission aboard the Vengeance as his fleet prepared for the final assault on the Vorthak flagship. The brave little girl had managed to steal a communications device and broadcast the ship's exact location despite being held prisoner for weeks. Her signal gave the human fleet the opportunity they had been waiting for, a chance to rescue the remaining children and eliminate Supreme Commander Veltar once and for all. The massive Vorthak vessel hung in space near the edge of a dying star system, its hull scarred from battles with human forces across the galaxy. Veltar had retreated to this remote location, hoping to escape the relentless pursuit of the human fleet, but Katie's transmission had revealed his hiding place. The flagship contained the last group of human children in Vorthak custody, along with the alien leadership responsible for centuries of slave trading. Admiral Brooks coordinated the attack from her command ship, while Captain Turner led the assault, forced directly toward the enemy vessel. 500 human ships surrounded the Vorthak flagship in a sphere formation that prevented any possibility of escape. The aliens had nowhere to run and no allies left to call for help, their entire civilization reduced to this single ship and its desperate crew. The battle began with precision strikes against the flagship's weapon systems and engines, disabling its ability to fight back or flee while avoiding damage to the sections where the children were held prisoner. Lisa Wayne directed the tactical operations with surgical precision, her weapons teams targeting specific points on the alien hull while Marines prepared for boarding operations. Katie Clark heard the sounds of battle echoing through the ship's corridors and knew that rescue was finally coming. She gathered the other human children in their holding area and prepared them for what might happen during the fighting. Marcus Johnson and Sophia Martinez helped her calm the younger kids while they waited for human soldiers to break down the doors that had held them captive for so long. The first wave of human Marines breached the flagship's hull through multiple entry points, fighting their way through corridors filled with desperate Vorthak defenders. The aliens knew they were facing extinction and fought with the fury of beings who had nothing left to lose. Every room became a battlefield as humans advanced toward the areas where their children were being held. Captain Turner personally led the team that reached the children's section, his face showing the strain of weeks spent hunting across the galaxy for this moment. He found Katie Clark standing protectively in front of the other kids, her young face showing a courage that would have made any parent proud. The reunion between the rescued children and their human rescuers brought tears to the eyes of battle-hardened soldiers. Dr. King accompanied the rescue teams and immediately began examining the children for signs of neural conditioning or physical harm. Katie and most of the others had resisted the Vorthak programming through sheer determination and mutual support, but some of the younger kids showed effects from the alien drugs and psychological manipulation. Medical treatment began immediately as the children were evacuated to safety aboard the human fleet. Supreme Commander Veltar made his final stand in the flagship's command center, surrounded by the last loyal members of his crew. He had spent 1,000 years building the Syndicate into the most powerful criminal organization in the galaxy, never imagining that targeting human children would bring about his complete destruction. The alien commander finally understood that he had awakened something terrible in the darkness between the stars. The human Marines who reached the command center showed no mercy to the aliens who had tortured children for profit. Veltar died, knowing that his entire species would follow him into extinction, victims of their own cruelty and the fury of parents who would never stop fighting for their young. The Vorthak Syndicate ended not with negotiation or surrender, but with the complete elimination of everyone who had participated in their crimes. Katie Clark was reunited with her parents, John and Lisa, aboard the medical ship where Dr. King treated the rescued children. The little girl who had organized resistance against alien captors was finally safe in her mother's arms, but the trauma of her experience would take time to heal. Her courage during captivity had saved not only herself, but had helped other children maintain their humanity in the face of systematic conditioning. The destruction of the Vorthak flagship marked the end of active combat operations, But humanity's campaign of extinction continued across the galaxy. Every world that had supported the slave trade faced the choice between complete surrender and total annihilation. Most chose to survive by abandoning their participation in the syndicate and releasing any remaining captives. Admiral Brooks oversaw the final phase of operations from her flagship as human forces occupied former Vorthak territories. The aliens' homeworld of Veltash Prime was reduced to radioactive dust as an example to other civilizations that might consider targeting human children. No trace of Vorthak civilization was allowed to survive except in the historical records that would warn future generations. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated what happened when someone threatened their young. Other species had always negotiated with criminals and accepted losses as part of life in a dangerous universe, but humans had chosen a different path. They had committed genocide against an entire civilization to protect their children and send a message that would echo across the stars for millennia. Marcus Johnson returned to his family on New Eden Colony, where his father Steve waited with the guitar they had been playing together when the Vorthak attacked. The boy had grown up during his weeks in captivity, but the music helped him remember who he was before the aliens tried to steal his identity. His recovery would take time, but the support of his family and community would help him heal. Sophia Martinez was reunited with her parents, Carmen and Diego, who had volunteered to serve aboard Admiral Brooks's flagship during the search for their daughter. The family had been separated by tragedy, but brought together by the determination of humanity to protect its young. Sophia's strength during captivity had helped other children survive their ordeal and maintain hope for rescue. Dr. King established treatment centers across human space to help the thousands of rescued victims recover from Vorthak conditioning. His research into alien neural programming led to breakthroughs in treating psychological trauma that would benefit not only the rescued children, but future victims of similar crimes. The medical knowledge gained from this tragedy would prevent other species from suffering the same fate. President Adams addressed the galaxy from Earth, explaining humanity's new doctrine regarding threats to their children. Any species or organization that targeted human young would face the same fate as the Vorthak Syndicate, complete extinction without possibility of negotiation or mercy. The message was clear and absolute, establishing humanity as the galaxy's most feared protector of innocent life. The war crimes trials that followed documented the full extent of Vorthak atrocities for the historical record. Evidence showed that the Syndicate had kidnapped and conditioned over 1 million beings during their 1,000-year reign of terror. The systematic torture and enslavement of children from dozens of species provided legal justification for humanity's campaign of extinction. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship as the last Vorthak facility was destroyed, watching the fires burn in space where an entire civilization had once existed. She thought of Katie Clark and the other children who had suffered at alien hands, knowing that their courage and humanity's response would ensure that no other young lives would be lost to the slave trade. The galaxy had learned that humanity's children were protected by a species willing to commit genocide to keep them safe.